I never thought a 10-year-old's whisper could split a family in half. But that night, as the last fork clinked onto the dinner plate, my daughter leaned close enough for me to feel her breath on my ear and said 5 words that set my heart hammering. Mom.
Und Claire heartfelt.
The air left the kitchen as if the room itself had sucked in a gasp. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the slow metronomic tick of the wall clock, each click landing like a nail into the coffin of the life I thought we had. I looked into my child's wide, trembling eyes and saw terror so raw it stripped away every easy explanation. This wasn't a scraped knee or a stolen candy bar. This was something darker, heavier, something that did not belong in a child's voice.
Und Claire.
I repeated, barely able to form the name. Claire, my husband's sister, the woman who had swaddled my newborn so I could sleep for the first time in days, the aunt who never forgot a birthday, who laughed too loud and hugged too long.
The very picture of devotion and trust.
My daughter nodded, lips pressed tight as though any further words might bring the ceiling down. Her small hands clutched the table edge until her knuckles turned white. I reached for her, but she flinched, and that tiny recoil pierced me deeper than the confession itself.
What do you mean, heartfelt?
My own voice cracked, I barely recognized it. Her eyes brimmed, a silent storm gathering. She said, if I told, the police would come, she whispered. The police.
The word rattled in my skull like a loose bolt.
Images collided, flashing lights, a gavel striking wood, the kind of headlines you never imagined tied to your own blood. I felt the room tilt, the scent of roasted chicken turned metallic in the back of my throat. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off as a child's misheard conversation, but my daughter's face held no mischief, only fear, pure and unfiltered. Whatever secret Claire had poured into those little ears was real enough to make my child shake. And in that single breathless moment, I understood. The family I thought I knew, the sister-in-law I trusted without question, the quiet domestic life I clung to, all of it had just cracked wide open. And the next call I made would not be to my husband. It would be to the police. The night it all splintered began like any other unremarkable Tuesday. I had just set the last plate of roast chicken on the dining table when the grandfather clock in the hall groaned out 7 deliberate chimes. The sound echoed through our narrow house like a warning bell, though I was too distracted to notice. My sister-in-law Marianne had arrived 10 minutes earlier carrying her trademark basket of wine and stale gossip. She swept in with that polished, almost theatrical smile of hers, a smile that always felt a shade too bright, like a porch light that hides the dark corners of a yard. My husband, Daniel, was already pouring glasses. Our daughter Lily, barely 10 and all elbows and restless curiosity, sat swinging her feet beneath the table, humming an off-key tune. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled the air, the golden skin of the chicken gleamed beneath the low pendant lamp. To anyone passing by our window, we must have looked like the model of suburban tranquility. I had no reason to suspect that, within the hour, the air in that same room would be dense with something I can only describe as metallic, like the taste of blood before it touches your tongue.
Marianne raised her glass first.
To family, she said, her voice a ribbon of false warmth.
We clinked and drank, the crystal ringing out like a fragile promise.
It began with the smallest of things, a sigh from Lily, almost swallowed by the scrape of Daniel's chair. But mothers are trained to catch the subtle shifts of their children. I turned, her small shoulders were drawn tight, eyes fixed on the tablecloth as though it might open up and swallow her. Lily. I whispered. Her lips parted, then closed. The moment stretched. Marianne, oblivious, launched into some anecdote about a neighbor's gaudy Christmas lights. But Lily's knuckles whitened around her fork. I reached out and covered her hand.
Sweetheart, what is it?
Her gaze flicked toward Marianne, then back to me. Her throat worked once, twice. Then, in a voice barely louder than the clock's ticking, she breathed words that turned the room to ice.
Und Marianne heartfelt.
I saw. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The clink of glass against wood, the hiss of the radiator, everything else went silent. Daniel's glass froze halfway to his mouth. What? He said, sharp enough to slice the air.
Marianne's look faltered.
Excuse me. Lily's eyes brimmed, but she pressed on.
In the garage.
Last night. She had blood on her hands.
The pendant light above us buzzed. Somewhere outside, a car backfired, and the sound made Lily flinch.
My heart began a slow, thunderous pounding. Marian set down her wineglass with calculated care. Lily, she said, each syllable a brittle crystal.
D'était sa terrible ting toussait.
It's true.
Lily's voice craqued into a sob.
I gripped her shoulders, half to comfort, half to steady myself. Honey, I said carefully, what exactly did you see? I couldn't sleep, she whispered. I went downstairs.
The door to the garage was open. Aunt Marianne was standing by the workbench.
There was a man on the floor. He wasn't moving. She had blood. Her words splintered into hiccuping breaths. Marian pushed back her chair, the legs screeched against the tile. This is outrageous, she snapped, but a tremor betrayed her. Daniel looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a question he was too afraid to form. My own mind raced. Children imagine things, dream things, but not details like that. I could smell the chicken cooling, its rosemary perfume suddenly acrid. The room had shrunk, even the air seemed to lean in, listening. Marianne's gaze darted to the hallway, toward the very door that led to the garage. And that, more than Lily's confession, made the first true spike of fear lance through me. My breath came shallow, like I'd been plunged into icy water. I stood, my chair toppling with a thud that made Lily jump. Daniel, I said, though my voice sounded like someone else's, distant and cracked.
Lock the door to the garage.
Marianne's head snapped toward me.
Don't you dare.
Daniel hesitated, torn between us. This is insane. Do it, I said, the command a whip in the quiet. He moved, slowly at first, then with sudden resolve. The deadbolt clicked, an ominous punctuation mark. Marianne rose, her posture stiff with indignation that felt rehearsed. You're frightening the child, she said, but there was sweat at her temples.
Lily Burrier face in my side.
I could feel her trembling through the thin cotton of my blouse. I tightened my hold on her and forced my voice steady. Marianne, if there's something we need to know, now is the time to speak. There is nothing. Then you won't mind if we call the police, I interrupted. Her eyes flashed, a quick glint of something darker than fear, calculation. You'd really drag the law into a child's nightmare? Daniel returned, phone in hand but uncertain. Maybe we should. The lights flickered, a brief stutter that drew our eyes upward.
Somewhere in the house, the old peep groaned.
The sound reminded me of a distant moan, and I shivered.
Marianne's voice hardened.
I will not be accused in my own brother's home. But the phrase caught me, accused. Not falsely accused. Just accused. I met Daniel's gaze. We shared the same unspoken realization. Mom, Lily whispered, pulling at my sleeve. The man, he wasn't breathing.
The room tilted.
I tasted copper at the back of my throat. I had always imagined that if danger came for my family, it would arrive like a thunderclap, clear, undeniable. But this was worse, a creeping dread, slow and intimate. Daniel began to dial.
Marianne lunged.
The motion was sudden, a streak of black fabric. She snatched the phone, sending it skidding across the floor. Stop, she cried, her voice cracking for the first time.
The sound froze us.
What did you do? I demanded. Her chest heaved, her carefully curated poise crumbled like wet paper. For a heartbeat she looked almost childlike, cornered and wild. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. Lily whimpered. Daniel bent to retrieve the phone, his hands trembling.
He stepped forward, my own fear burning into something sharpé, hauté. Tell us now. Marianne's eyes darted towards the locked garage door, then back to me.
The silence stretched, heavy as the air before a storm. Finally, she said, I just wanted him to leave me alone.
The confession hung there like a live wire, humming with implication. Daniel's thumb hovered over the call button.
Who? Marianne swallowed. Her gaze slid to Lily, and a tear carved a path down her cheek.
Your neighbor. Gerald. He wouldn't stop.
I warned him. I felt Lily stiffen against me. Marianne continued, voice low, each word dragged like a chain.
He came last night.
He tried again. I grabbed the wrench. I didn't mean. Her voice broke.
Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like restless spirit.
Daniel completed the call, his voice a hollow echo as he spoke to the dispatcher. Marian sank into her chair, head in her hands. Lily clung tighter, her small heartbeat racing against mine. In that instant, our comfortable Tuesday dinner turned into a crime scene, our family's quiet veneer torn open by a 10-year-old's courage and a whisper that shattered far more than supper. The police sirens arrived before I could catch my breath. Blue and red lights spun across the dining room walls like frantic brushstrokes, washing the rosemary chicken and scattered cutlery in a fever dream of color. Lily clung to me as if I were an anchor in a storm, her small fingers digging crescents into my side. Daniel hovered by the front door, his face a pale map of disbelief. Marianne, my sister-in-law, the woman whose smile had always sparkled like a well-polished secret, sat rigid in the chair she had once claimed with an easy grace. Now her elbows rested on her knees, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles looked carved from marble. Her eyes followed the swirling lights outside, each flicker slicing through the mask she'd worn for years. 2 officers stepped in, their boots squeaking against the hardwood. The taller one, badge catching the light, surveyed the scene with a calm that felt rehearsed. "Ma'am," he said, his gaze settling on Marianne, "we received a call regarding a possible assault." Marianne did not move. I swallowed the metallic taste that had lodged itself in the back of my throat since Lily's confession. She, my sister-in-law, admitted she, hurt someone, I managed, each word scraping my throat.
In the garage. Ornebord, Gérald.
The officer's brows tightened by a fraction. "Where is the victim?" "In the garage," I said. "Or, at least," I faltered. "That's where Lily saw."
Lily presse d'heure face into my blouse, me fling à Kiesob.
The shorter officer nodded and disappeared toward the hallway that led to the garage, his flashlight beam dancing over the walls like a restless ghost. Marian finally looked up. The blue-red light caught her face, revealing streaks of tears cutting through the faint powder of makeup. "I didn't mean to kill him," she whispered. Daniel flinched.
God, Marianne.
"It was supposed to be over," she said, her voice trembling yet oddly defiant. "I told him to stop coming. He wouldn't listen." The taller officer crouched to meet her eyes. "Ma'am, I need you to stand and keep your hands visible." She obeyed, movements slow, almost regal despite the shiver in her shoulders.
From the garage came the sharp crackle of a radio.
The other officer's voice floated back. "We've got a male unconscious. Pulse is weak but present. Requesting immediate medical."
Alive.
The word landed like a stone dropped into deep water, sending ripples through the tension. Lily exhaled a shaky breath, and only then did I realize I'd been holding mine. Marianne's eyes closed, and for a fleeting second relief softened her face. But when she opened them again, the old guardedness returned, like shutters slamming against a storm. The EMTs arrived in a blur of sirens and swift motions. Through the hallway, I glimpsed the stretcher, a man's figure draped in shadow, crimson staining the white sheet.
Gérald.
Our neighbor who waved too eagerly, whose garden parties ran late into the night. Marianne watched the stretcher pass, her gaze unreadable.
When the door shut and the siren faded, silence rushed back like a tide.
The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need your statement." Daniel and I exchanged a glance. I could almost hear the unsaid question in his eyes. How long has this darkness lived next to us without our knowing? Marianne lowered herself back into the chair. Her fingers worried the edge of her sleeve as she began. "He started coming by 6 months ago. At first it was harmless. He'd wave when I watered the plants. Then he began lingering. Compliments that clung too long. One evening he followed me home when Daniel was away. I told him no firmly, but he only laughed." Her voice sharpened. "I told my brother. He thought I was exaggerating." Daniel flinched, color draining from his cheeks. "I should have gone to the police," she continued. "But I thought, if I ignored him, he'd grow bored."
Last night he came again.
He cornered me in the garage. I grabbed the first thing I could, your wrench. Her eyes flicked toward me. He lunged. I swung. He fell. The room held its breath. The officer's pen scratched across his notebook. "You didn't call emergency services after?"
He panicked. Her voice cracked.
I ran. I told myself he would leave. That maybe I'd imagined how still he was.
Silence spread like smoke.
I wanted to be angry, to shout that she should have trusted us, that she should have called the police the moment it began. But the image of Gerald, our friendly neighbor, loomed behind my eyelids, his easy grin, the way he leaned too close when he borrowed tools. Suddenly every memory rewrote itself with sinister undertones. Daniel rubbed his face, as if trying to erase the guilt Marianne's words etched there. The officer closed his notebook. For now, you'll need to come with us to provide a formal statement. Medical will update us on the man's condition. If he survives, charges may vary. Marianne nodded, resignation settling over her like a heavy coat. As they led her toward the door, Lily's small voice broke the silence.
Und Marianne. Marianne paused.
You were brave, Lily said.
Marianne's shoulder trembled.
She turned her head just enough for us to catch the curve of a sad smile.
No, sweetheart, she whispered. Brave is telling the truth when it scares you.
That was you. The door closed behind them. For a long time we stood in the hush that followed, the house breathing around us. The clock ticked, each beat a reminder of the fragile normal that had shattered. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low. I should have believed her. I wrapped my arms around Lily, feeling the damp warmth of her tears soak through my sleeve. We both should have, I said. Outside, the neighborhood glowed with the indifferent yellow of streetlights. Somewhere, a dog barked, oblivious to the chaos that had bled into our quiet street. I stared at the faint reflection of our family in the dark windowpane, 3 figures where there had been 4, and wondered how many other smiles in this world hid their own shadows, waiting for the smallest whisper to bring the darkness to light. The silence that settled after Marianne's arrest wasn't peaceful. It was a low hum that filled every corner of the house like a held breath, heavy with the weight of what we hadn't seen, what we had refused to see. Daniel sat hunched at the kitchen table, the same table where the night had detonated only hours earlier. The rosemary chicken still lay on its platter, congealed and gray, as if mocking the normalcy we had once shared. Lily had finally fallen asleep upstairs, her small frame exhausted from the storm of police lights and whispered statements. I couldn't sleep. The images replayed in my mind on a merciless loop, blue and red lights, the stretcher, Marianne's whisper, he wouldn't listen. Daniel's hands tightened around his coffee mug. I need to know, he said finally, voice hoarse. If she told the truth.
About Gerald.
I met his eyes. They were rimmed with sleepless red, haunted. What if she did? He shook his head. Then I failed her. If she didn't, he trailed off, the sentence a cliff he refused to climb. Outside, the neighborhood wore its midnight mask. The quiet was almost taunting. I want to check the garage, Daniel said. The police took Gerald, but there might be something they missed. Something that proves what she said. The thought of stepping back into that space made my skin crawl. But the unanswered questions pulled at me like a tide. We moved through the hallway with deliberate caution, each floorboard creak loud in the sleeping house.
The door to the garage gaped slightly, a mouth left open mid-gasp.
When we pushed it wide, the metallic scent hit first, a mixture of motor oil and something sharper, faint but unmistakable.
Daniel flicked the light switch.
The bulb sputtered, casting the room in a jittery glow. The wrench lay where the police had marked it with a fluorescent tag, an ordinary tool turned into a witness. But something else caught my eye, a dark smear against the concrete near the far wall. Not blood. Something more deliberate.
Ik knelt, uitbunding.
The smear formed a pattern, a series of faint scratches etched into the floor. Letters.
Daniel, he whispered.
Look. He crouched beside me. The scratches spelled a single word, hurried yet clear, help.
A chill raced down my spine.
That wasn't from tonight, Daniel said, his voice barely audible. The concrete, those marks are old.
He ran my finger over the groove, feeling the rough edge.
Someone tried to write this long before tonight. The garage suddenly felt smaller, the air denser. Daniel stood and scanned the walls. His gaze froze on the workbench.
What is that?
A scrap of fabric dangled from the vice grip, stiff with dried something, paint or... He pulled it free. The cloth was torn from a shirt, patterned with tiny blue squares.
Gerald's shirt.
I remembered it from the last block party, the way the pattern caught the sunset as he poured drinks with too eager charm. But the stain wasn't paint. It was dark crusted, blood. Daniel's face drained of color. Why would Gerald's shirt be here?
Before tonight. The question hung like smoke. Suddenly, the key of the neighborhood cracked.
A distant siren wailed, then faded. I forced a breath. This isn't just about tonight. Someone else has been here.
Someone left un message.
Daniel's jaw tightened. Or Gerald has been here, more than we knew. I shivered. The garage, once an innocuous space of tools and forgotten boxes, now felt like the mouth of something hungry. Daniel took out his phone, snapping photos of the scratch marks and the cloth. We need to show this to the detectives, he said. Before I could answer, Lily's voice floated down the hallway. Mom. She stood in the doorway, hair mussed, eyes heavy with sleep. But something in her expression made my heart lurch, an awareness too sharp for a child.
Sweetheart, he said gently, go back to bed.
She shook her head. I heard someone outside my window. Daniel and I exchanged a glance. Are you sure? I asked. Her lower lip trembled. A man. He was whispering. He said, tell them the truth.
The word sliced through the air like glass. Daniel strode past us to the front door, yanking it open.
The yard stretched quiet and empty under the moon's pale glow.
No footprint disturbed the deathly grass.
But Lily's eyes, wide and frightened, told me she hadn't imagined it. Daniel checked every lock, every window, while I held Lily close. When he returned, his face was set in grim lines. Nothing, he said.
No sign of anyone.
I stroked Lily's hair.
It's all right, honey.
You're safe. But the reassurance rang hollow even to my own ears. Upstairs, I tucked her back into bed, but her fingers clung to my sleeve. Mom, Aunt Marian didn't hurt that man, she whispered. He was already hurt.
My had skipped.
What do you mean? She looked away. I saw him here last week. He was with someone. I don't know who. But they were fighting. He fell. He didn't move. Then a woman dragged him away.
A cold shock spread through me.
Did you tell anyone?
She shook her head, tears pooling.
I was scared. She said if I told, she'd come back.
The room tilted. Another woman. Another layer of darkness.
I kissed Lily's forehead and whispered, you're safe. I promise. But my mind raced. Who was the woman?
Why bring Gerald back tonight?
Back in the kitchen, Daniel listened as I relayed Lily's words. His eyes hardened. This changes everything, he said. He reached for his phone, but before he could dial, it vibrated in his hand.
An unknown number.
He put it on speaker. A woman's voice, low and sharp as a blade, filled the room. You don't know the truth, she said. Stop digging, or you'll end up like him. The line went dead. The three of us stared at the silent phone.
Outside, the night pressed close against the windows, thick with secret.
The weight of that call hung in the air long after the dial tone faded. Somewhere beyond the walls of our home, someone was watching. Someone who already knew how to silence a man like Gerald, and perhaps us, if we came too close. And for the first time since the sirens left our street, I realized Marianne might not be the only one in danger. The phone in Daniel's hand went dark, leaving behind a silence so taut I could almost hear the house breathe. Lily's small hand tightened around mine until her knuckles whitened. The anonymous voice still echoed in my head, low, cold, promising an end we dared not imagine.
Daniel exhaled, a ragged sound.
That wasn't a prank, he said finally, his voice hoarse. She knew.
About Gerald. About US digging.
I swallowed the lump in my throat. We have to tell Detective Morris, I said. Right now. Lily's fingers trembled in mine. Mom, will she come here? I crouched to meet her eyes, trying to steady my voice. Sweetheart, we're not going to let anyone hurt us. But we need help.
The kind only the police can give. Daniel's gaze flicked toward the darkened windows.
If she's watching, he left the thought unfinished. He pressed the phone back to life, scrolling for the detective's number the officer had given us. The digital glow threw sharp angles across his face, carving the worry lines deeper.
He tapped the call button, and the ringing cut through the key like a countdown.
1 ring. 2. 3.
Maurice, came the tired voice on the other end.
I pictured him leaning over his desk, coffee gone cold, eyes already lined from too many late nights. This is Daniel, my husband said quickly.
From the Gerald Newman case.
We just got a call, threatening us.
A woman.
She said we don't know the truth and told us to stop digging. Morris's voice sharpened. Did she give a name? Any background noise? No name, Daniel replied.
Just, calme.
Cold. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. I took the phone from him. Detective, she knows about the garage.
About Gerald.
And she said we'd end up like him. We found something too, scratched into the concrete. The word help. And a piece of Gerald's shirt.
Stained with blood. Silence.
Then Morris's voice, lower, more deliberate.
Stay inside.
Lock every door and window. Do not open for anyone you don't know. I'm dispatching a patrol car immediately.
I'm on my way. The line clicked dead.
Daniel set the phone down as though it burned. We moved in near silence, checking every window latch, every deadbolt, the house suddenly a fortress of thin walls and weaker promises.
Upstairs, Lily trailed us like a silent shadow.
She didn't complain when I ushered her into our bedroom, just curled on the bed and watched the door as if sheer vigilance might hold the darkness back. 10 minutes stretched like an hour. Every creak of the house, every brush of wind against the siding became a threat. Somewhere outside, a dog barked and then went suddenly silent, as if the night itself had pressed a hand over its muzzle. Finally the red-blue wash of a patrol car bled across our curtains. Relief flickered through me, fragile but real. 2 officers, neither the ones from earlier, stood on the porch, their flashlights cutting clean paths through the dark. After verifying their badges, Daniel let them in. They moved with the careful efficiency of men who knew danger might be waiting in every shadow. Detective Morris is en route, one said, his voice low. We'll secure the perimeter until he arrives. The other officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a steadiness I envied, crouched beside Lily. You're very brave, she said softly.
Can you tell me what you heard?
Lily's voice was barely a whisper.
A man outside my window.
He said, tell them the truth. And then Mom and Dad got the phone call. The officer nodded, her expression unreadable. You did the right thing telling your parents. As they moved through the house, checking locks and shining flashlights into the dark, I caught Daniel's gaze. He was trying to be strong for us, but the fear behind his eyes matched the storm in my chest. When Morris arrived, his presence filled the room like a sudden gravity. He listened as we repeated every detail, the scratches, the fabric, Lily's sighting, the phone call. You said the voice was a woman's, he said finally.
Describe it.
I closed my eyes, recalling the low, deliberate tone. Smooth. Almost rehearsed.
No accent et coup de place.
Like she was reading a script she'd written herself. Morris nodded, jotting notes.
And the whisper outside the window? A man, Lily said softly.
He sounded tired.
The detective's eyes narrowed.
2 people then. Coordinated. Daniel's jaw tightened. Why us? Why threaten us? That's what we'll find out, Morris replied. He turned to the officers. Check the yard, every inch.
Look for footprint, cigarette butt, anything.
They disappeared into the night, beams sweeping the lawn. Minutes later, one called out, Detective. Over here. We followed to the side of the house. There, beneath Lily's window, the dew-slick grass bore the clear imprint of a boot. Fresh.
Buzzy ditley a single object, a black leather glove, finge curled like a wetting hand.
Morris lifted it with a pen. No obvious markings. We'll run prints. A shiver chased down my spine. Someone had been there, close enough to touch the glass where my daughter slept. Back inside, Morris turned to us. This isn't random. Whoever called you knew we'd find that glove. They want us to know we're being watched. Daniel's face tightened.
So what now?
Now, Morris said, we protect you and keep digging. And you, he fixed his gaze on me. You call me if you see or hear anything.
No hésitation.
After the officers left to sweep the neighborhood, the house felt emptier than ever, though every door was locked and 2 patrol cars idled outside.
Entier, and yet crowded with unseen eyes.
I sat beside Lily as she drifted into a restless sleep. Daniel stood at the window, staring into the darkness where the glove had been found. Proof in the darkness, he murmured, the words I had spoken earlier about the garage scratches. His voice was flat. Now the darkness is looking back. I reached for his hand. It was cold, the kind of cold that sinks past skin into bone. In that moment, I understood what kind of phone call no parent ever wants to make, not just the one to the police, but the unspoken one to fate itself, the desperate plea that the night would not swallow their child before the truth surfaced.
Somewhere outside, hidden beyond the reach of the patrol lights, someone was still listening.
The sirens faded into the night, leaving behind a ringing silence that felt almost louder than their wails. I stood in the doorway long after the patrol cars disappeared, the flashing lights having painted our walls in frantic red and blue until the very last second. Now, the house was washed in moonlight and dread. The air inside felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had inhaled all the chaos and were holding it in. My daughter, Chloe, clung to my side, her small body trembling against me. Her breath came in sharp, uneven gulps, half sobs, half hiccups. I tightened my arm around her, though my own body shook like a branch in a storm. Across the room, my sister-in-law Marissa sat slumped on the couch. She looked smaller now, shrunken. Not the bright, laughing woman I once knew, not the woman who used to braid Chloe's hair and sneak her cookies before dinner. Her wrists were bound loosely with the plastic cuffs the officers had left in place, her head bowed as if the weight of her own choices finally crushed her. I had always thought betrayal would come with fire and fury, shouted words, broken dishes, a cathartic scream. Instead, it came like this, a slow unraveling, the quiet aftermath more deafening than the storm. Chloe wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Mom," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread, "did I do the right thing?" The question gutted me. I dropped to my knees so our eyes met. "You did what you had to," I said, my voice steady only because I willed it so. "You told the truth. That's always the right thing, even when it hurts." She nodded, but her eyes flicked to Marissa, and I followed her gaze. My sister-in-law lifted her head, meeting Chloe's stare with a look I couldn't name, some bitter cocktail of shame and sorrow. "I never meant for you to know," Marissa said finally. Her voice was hoarse, brittle. "I never wanted you involved." Chloe flinched, pressing her face into my shoulder. I wanted to demand why. I wanted to rage, to shake her until answers tumbled out. But the words stuck. What could possibly justify the evidence Chloe had found? The hidden bank statements, the coded messages, the plan that would have ruined lives and emptied accounts. The officers had said they'd be in touch. That there would be more questions. That this was only the beginning. And yet here we were, stranded in the echo of what she'd done, what we'd uncovered.
He rose slowly, every muscle clashing with the weight of the night.
"Marissa," I said, my voice low but sharp, "I loved you like a sister. You brought this into our home. You made Chloe part of this." Her eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Maybe there was nothing left to say. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at the empty street, the sound thin and lonely. I thought of tomorrow, how the morning sun would rise indifferent, how the world would go on while our lives remained split cleanly into before and after. I guided Chloe toward the hallway.
"Comment?" he whispered.
"Let's try to sleep." She hesitated, glancing back once more. Marissa had lowered her head again, her silhouette a dark confession against the pale couch. In the quiet that followed, I realized there are betrayals that don't end when the sirens fade.
Some wound echo long after the police leave, after the truth is dragged into the light.
As I closed Chloe's bedroom door and listened to her breathing steady into sleep, a single thought settled heavy in my chest. The law might take Marissa away, but the shadows she cast will haunt us for years to come.